The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Well, here we go, everybody. It's Need to Know on the eve of the 2024 presidential election. We have spent a lot of time on this program. I'm Kip Kiefer, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us here on TKR, all the Apple platforms, wherever you may be catching us here on the archives page of TKR, or perhaps on my page where all of my broadcast endeavors are posted, kqshows.com. Wherever you're listening, we're delighted to have you, and I can't begin to come up with the right words to express my appreciation to anybody who listens to the show and kind of opens their mind and their ears to some things I have to say. If you're a first-time listener, I always stress in every program that there's a lot of media these days that tries to tell you how to think. That is the last thing I want to do. I want to give you my perspectives based on not what I've heard from somebody else, based on not from watching any news programming or videos on social media or even written articles in the few newspapers that are still out there, because all of those have become the opposite of journalism. They've become biased opinion pieces where the writer or the host or whatever is trying to inject their opinions into your thought process. And if you ever hear me say anything that you think is me trying to do that, then you have not been in line with my intent, because I want to give you information on this program that gives you the ability to sit down, absorb that, think about it, and see how it affects your opinions, or allows you to have a path to have a better perspective on things. Because as much media is out there, as much information is out there, so much of it's so biased and so partisan and so slanted toward trying to drag you over the finish line to their perspective. My goal is for every American to utilize the greatest right we've been given, and that is the ability for free speech, for free expression of thought, and for using our individual liberty that we've been granted by our forefathers, the founders of this country, and the United States Constitution, that allows you to reach conclusions for yourself. And you shouldn't feel peer pressure. You shouldn't buckle to emotional triggers and impulses. You should carefully consider every fact that you know and look at things with the two most important words that there are, I almost butchered that grammatically, that there are in the English language. And those two words, common sense. And it's your common sense. It's not common sense is not a one size fits all. It's your common sense, your ability to reason, and your decision-making capability as an individual American who's been given unbelievable freedom and the ability to actually be the government of your own country, the country of the people, by the people, for the people. You, me, everybody listening, everybody you know is the United States government, and we've got to get back to that, and everybody should agree that that's what we are founded upon, and that's what we should be striving for. So with all that said, I want to give you my final thoughts on the eve of this presidential election. I'm not going to be fire and brimstone here. Again, I'm not going to try to push you in any direction, but I'm going to explain to you very sensibly and very logically how I've reached my decision, and it was a long, long time ago. I want to start off by saying two things before I get into that. Number one, it's the eve of the election, and there are still uh, reports of people not being decided. Really? How is that possible? That's like saying, it's Christmas Eve and I'm not really decided yet on what I'm going to do tomorrow on the holiday. That's, maybe the case somewhere, and that might be a bad analogy, but I don't believe that there's anybody walking around or listening to this program right now that has not decided which way they're going to go. Maybe people are not committed to the point of absolutely not going the direction that they have logically deduced and used their common sense to arrive upon. But if that's the case, I'm absolutely shocked because they keep talking this week about last minute people breaking for this side or that side. That might be fine a week ago. Even that is illogical to me. I think everybody knows who they're supporting and why. And if they're still listening, maybe they're not steadfast in that conclusion. But I don't believe that there are people that don't know what they're going to do in terms of voting, especially in this era where we have not election day, we have election season, which I think is ludicrous to start with. Yes, okay, we need to live in a society where everybody has access and can go at any time and I guess get their vote in. That's very important. But the concept of election day is kind of the whole idea of a democratic process, the whole newfound way of going. Terry Quillian and I, my political and news broadcast partner, also great on local sports programs here on college football with me in Birmingham. But Terry and I had a conversation back in 2016 on one of our Birmingham shows talking about this whole new dynamic of early voting and all the ways that it's been made more convenient. And really, with it spread out into all these different avenues, ballot harvesting, especially, where campaign people can go out, have a list of people that haven't been active or some not even alive, and come back miraculously with a filled in ballot that they can present as legitimate. That just kind of goes against the whole principle of election day and a free society picking their leaders when you have the partisan campaign people out hustling up votes. It's a tried and true American tradition to have candidates on the stump, to have volunteers standing around at universities and shopping malls and wherever, handing out materials or trying to get people to stop and talk to them about the election, or even knocking on doors, making phone calls. All of that is great. But when they come back with a ballot in their hand, allegedly verified with a signature from a voter, that's just pretty sketchy to me. The whole ballot harvesting thing to me is just a ruse that really enables a lot more suspect activity. And there's a lot of different aspects. We don't need to pick them all apart here of these early drop boxes and mail-in ballots. I happen to know for a fact that a friend of mine whose daughter had moved back home after a divorce, a registered Democrat, he got the mail at his house every day and said over an 11-day period in 2020 during COVID, she received, and she verified it with him because he saw them and actually took a photo. She was sent 7 different ballots from 7 different Democrat organizations. How these were official ballots, how they got hold of those, I don't know. Are these ones that were stolen from mailboxes or fell into hands illicitly? But there's just so many questions about some of the corners that can be cut and some of the cheating that's enabled with this 2 months in some periods, in some cases, period of early voting. I don't like it. I'll never like it. And even if it favors the candidate that I choose, I don't like it at all. It's not the way that the system was designed. You were supposed to get on your wagon or your horse or get into town however you could and place your ballot. on election day. And I think it's a sad thing that we've gotten away from that. And, I won't even talk about the tabulation of voting. That's another tragic situation that has been, let's just say, heavily influenced by the placement of a lot of people in those jobs. Remember what Joseph Stalin said. I remind you all the time, one of the worst dictators in the history of the world. Joseph Stalin said, it really doesn't matter who casts the votes. What matters is who counts the votes. So think about that. Any time that some of these states that are razor close take 2, 3, 4 days to finalize their counting in an era where we've got all kinds of machine help. How was it in the 1930s and 40s that people voted on election day with a paper ballot and we had a result by that night? It's just questions that I ponder, and I think, once again, using your own common sense, you should ask those questions as well. But that's the first thing. I don't believe that there's that many undecided people walking around. I think people pretty much are locked in on what they're going to do. And I think the estimate this morning is close to 75 million people have already voted. That would be a huge percentage. In the COVID year 2020, supposedly about 150 million people voted, which was 35 million more than voted in 2016 when there wasn't a pandemic. Those numbers awful suspect to me. We had 35 million more people participate. Yeah, I'm not buying it. I don't like it. I don't believe it. But if that number is legitimate, 150 million, already half the population have cast their votes before election day, which is interesting. And we will see what impact that has on this election. So I don't believe there's any undecideds. And the second thing, I don't, this polling stuff, every day it fluctuates. Harris has the advantage. Trump is on a surge. Harris is getting a lot of people that were undecided now in the last minute. I think it all is designed to keep interest at a peak level for everybody involved. They don't want to tell you if one candidate or the other has a big advantage because that's bad for business. The networks always, no matter if they're the most liberal network on the planet or the most way far right conservatives, they always start every single newscast with the same headline. This election may be the closest in American history. It is razor thin. It is a dead heat going into the final days. That's what they want to tell you because that keeps you tuning in. And I hate to be a conspiracy theorist in terms of the whole promotion. All these networks now have invested in these multi-gazillion dollar systems that break down every county, every tiny town, all the different trends historically and on election night. They've all got massive investments because this election stuff is big business. And they certainly don't want to tell you if one candidate or the other has a big edge because they want you on the edge of your seat for as long as it takes. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, if it's tomorrow afternoon, they're going to have eyeballs on their networks and they're going to have sponsors kicking in tons of money. And the corporate giants that own all these networks are going to laugh all the way to the bank. So color me skeptical that the whole thing's just not a giant hype fest. And that disturbs me as well. I don't think it's as razor thin and a dead heat as they say. I think the trends are going to be pretty evident early. I won't tell you who I believe because, again, I don't want to sway anybody here, but I think there's a clear-cut edge, and I'll be very surprised if that's not the case. And if it's not the case, then it opens the door to what I just talked about, that there's a lot of different things now where how much are we really in control as voters of final outcomes? So there's a lot of things that worry me now about our process. And I'll move on to the 3 words that I want you to consider as you are watching everything unfold, because there's 3 reasons in this election. Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president of the United States, an individual who only got into the federal realm of politics in a jungle primary, which is what they're called now in California, where it's not Republican versus Democrat anymore. It's the top two vote getters in a primary square off in the election. So she beat another Democrat to take over the Senate seat from the California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who served for about 75 years and passed away a few years back. Kamala Harris finished out her term in the Senate, which are 6-year terms. That was her first visit to Washington, or her first, I don't know, visit, that's the wrong word, her first time in government in Washington. Of course, her background was being a district attorney in San Francisco. She was the protege of Willie Brown, who was 45 years her elder, who was a longtime, very significant politician in California, the Speaker of the California House, really a far left liberal who got a lot done in California to make it the kind of let's just call it basically socialist state that it is today. That was her big influence, of course, by being Willie Brown's assistant and protege. Kamala Harris in her 20s had some kind of flashy sports car. So she must have had some great advice for experienced Willie Brown. Anyway, her beginnings are a little bit questionable. She went on to become district attorney of San Francisco. Really had the kind of policies we're seeing now around the country, where don't blame the criminals. Let's let the criminals are guilty with an explanation, so they shouldn't be punished for their crimes. It's a trend that she has steadfastly stood behind all of her career. But then she had a period where California voters demanded a crackdown on the drug crimes that were just completely flushing their state down the toilet. So she had a brief period where she became a hardcore arresting people and prosecuting them to the full extent of the law for marijuana violations. She put a lot of people in jail because it was politically expedient at that time, gaining her popularity in California, which has led to she becoming eventually the Attorney General of California, and went right back to the kind of ultra liberal policies that characterize her today. Far left. Her father, a PhD professor, tenured professor at Stanford, is a published author, well known Marxist, big government. Government is elite. Government should be in charge. Far left individual. And Kamala has been in lockstep with that philosophy her whole career. So all of this campaign ads of her being a centrist and her being for the middle class and all of that, you take it with a grain of salt, because her background and her resume, she was the most liberal senator in the United States Senate during her couple of years there, even in surveys and analysis, more liberal than self-avowed socialist Democrat, or excuse me, Democrat socialist Bernie Sanders. If you're left of Bernie Sanders, man, you are way left. And that's what she did. She made statements that she wanted to work to eliminate the filibuster, which protects our country. It requires a supermajority on bills that are constitutional changes and different things, like the Green New Scam, which was a $93 trillion. Think about that figure. I don't think it's even comprehensible for most of us. That's just off the charts, ridiculous. When we've got a deficit now in our country of 35 or 40 trillion dollars, they wanted to spend 93 trillion dollars on this Green New Deal, which I call, and so others, the new green scam, which would completely transform everything in the country, take away all sources of energy, with the exception of what they consider acceptable green energy. She was a vehement proponent of this and actually voted for that bill in the Senate. And all of a sudden now she's middle of the road. Oh, now she's for fracking after saying on day one she would eliminate fracking. Now she's for it. She is saying everything she needs to say to try and convince people that she has mellowed over the years and learned a lot of things. That's what a lot of apologists say. Well, all of us come to different conclusions after life experience. It's a scam. This is a far left candidate. And if that's what floats your boat, knock yourself out. I'm not telling you not to vote for her. If you want this country to become like Venezuela, like Cuba, like the Soviet Russia for many years, like China, where the government owns all industry, operates all health care, basically is your nanny from birth, from cradle to grave. If that's the kind of country you want to live in, then by all means, step right up. I'm not discouraging you. I'm just defining the different situations. The Donald Trump option, there's a lot of people that have the emotional impulse to immediately dismiss him because he's acerbic, he's egotistical, he rambles and says things that are ridiculously stupid. But that's just the guy is who he is. It's Donald Trump. If you don't like that, you're perfectly privileged to be in that position. However, this is not a act like his opponent. She is a star right now in a one woman play, trying to convince you she's a moderate and she's for you if you're in the middle class, and she's going to make your life better. Well, this just in, she's running against her own record. She's running against the last 3,000 plus days where she's been vice president of the United States, serving at the side of a president that didn't have the cognizant mind function to be making decisions. If she was truly an innovative and inspired leader, espousing all of these policies that she's trying to sell now, and Bernie Sanders himself, when asked, what do you think about her pivot to the middle? He just kind of laughed and said, I don't think she's pivoted to the middle. I think she's just trying to say the things she needs to say to become mainstream to get elected. And that's pretty disturbing right there. So she's not, everybody says Trump's a liar. She is maybe not bold-faced lying, but she is definitely completely reinventing herself to be some kind of hybrid commodity that can become elected. Donald Trump is what he is. He's had a term in office. All of this hysteria that he's going to round up his enemies and have them shot. He's going to jail people. He's going to have an enemies list. In the last election against Hillary Clinton, he had the opportunity when he got to be president to push his Department of Justice to indict her. A lot of the charges that he faced in terms of not securing classified information, Hillary Clinton went one step more. She had all that information on her private server. It was the most heinous violation of federal law you could possibly imagine. And he said, "Hey, it's over. I'm not going to prosecute her." He could have pushed that, and Hillary would have been impossible to defend herself because that was such a blatant violation. And then she, despite having all that evidence subpoenaed, her laptop, all of her files, all of that was destroyed, along with 14 cell phones that were smashed to pieces with a sledgehammer to completely eliminate all of the evidence against her. So obstruction charges, the list would have been 5 miles long, but you didn't see the Trump government go after Hillary Clinton because at that point, what was the use? He was president. She had violated the law, but he didn't press that. And now all of a sudden, he's going to be the second coming of Adolf Hitler and persecute his enemies and, lead them to elimination. It's just a fallacy. This guy has a tremendous family unit, a great background. He has built industries. The New York skyline is largely, the modern day skyline is largely a Trump creation. Donald Trump is an established guy. He's 78 years old. He is not planning on being a dictator for the next 20 years. They make it sound like he's 35 years old, and his plan is to dominate politics and refuse to ever leave office. Trump knows he's in the waning days of his run, and he is allowed 4 more years from a constitutional standpoint. So all of the hype and all of the hysteria is absurd. And let me tell you the three most compelling reasons that I'm supporting Trump. Again, I've made it quite clear I'm not a Trump lover. I think there's a lot of Trump that's really rough around the edges, and Trump is too genuine for his own good. This week, he got in big trouble by saying that Liz Cheney, the ultimate war hawk, should get a taste of her own medicine because she votes for us to be involved globally in every conflict there is. And there's a good reason for that. Her father and her family, the former Vice President Dick Cheney, who was the most hated guy by the Democrats just 10 years ago. Now, of course, the Cheneys are on board against Trump because he actually pointed out and did what you would consider, Ronald Reagan would consider, the ultimate foul of criticizing another Republican. Trump not only criticized the Cheney family, he really kind of laid them right out for everybody to see because their involvement in Halliburton, which is one of the biggest producers of weapons and military equipment in the world. When Dick Cheney took office as vice president under George Bush, Halliburton was the number 70 or so between 70 and 75 biggest weapon producing war machine company that there was. By the time Cheney got out of office, they were number 16. This is a multi-gazillion dollar business with massive contracts with the U.S. government. Every time the Americans enter into a conflict around the world, weapons are produced. All this money that's gone to Ukraine, over $100 billion, so much of that is in weapons, and companies like Raytheon and Halliburton are the ones who cash in. So there's certainly incentive for the Cheneys, and Trump's criticism of them has just ignited Liz Cheney to now be somebody that was loathed by the Democratic parties, now campaigning with Kamala Harris. And what Trump said the other day, which they're doing what they always do on the left. They're taking one sentence from that. Trump was saying that she's the ultimate war hawk. Her family benefits from all of this military activity, and she thinks nothing of getting us involved in conflicts and dispatching 10,000, 15,000, 50,000 American troops to all these hellholes around the world, these hot spots where they are in tremendous danger. All he was trying to point out was, just think how the shoe would be on the other foot if Liz Cheney and all of these radicals that always want Americans to be involved in wars and conflicts, all of these huge industrial companies that make weapons and bombs and planes and tanks, pumping millions and millions of dollars into the Washington political process to get votes by congressmen to authorize all this activity, all those kickbacks, all that money. He was saying, wouldn't it be different if Liz Cheney had to put on a uniform and man a post in one of these conflict zones, or other people that are well-known war hawks always supporting the United States involvement in conflicts all around the world? Trump is against war. He's against dispatching American troops to other people's fights. And it's high time that we kind of got into that mindset, because I know my sons are probably past the time where they would have been vulnerable to be, and there was no draft, but who knows, that could have been reinstituted with a real problem. Americans have come to the aid of the world many times, but it's important to note that things that Trump says are distorted, because he used the line about, let's see how she feels if she's got 25 guns aimed at her face. And people have taken that to he's advocating her execution. That's not at all what he said. He said, if she was dispatched to war, would she still be so enthusiastic about sending your son or daughter to war? And that's a pretty good question to ask, because I know what my answer is. Anyway, the three reasons, and they all start with E, why I think you need to think hard about who you vote for in this election, even if you've made up your mind, which I already said I think a lot of people have. But the three E's are what I want you to consider: energy, economy, Elon. Energy, obvious. The first thing Joe Biden did, and he said he was going to do it, and Americans ignored it anyway. He said in the last debate with Trump in 2020 that he is going to eliminate the American gas and oil business. The American gas and oil business is the backbone of our economy. It is what fuels everything, and we've got the biggest supply of gas and oil under our feet in the world. And Joe Biden pretty much completely shut it down when he came into office. Now, if you may be have some sympathy for this whole climate change hoax that we are in our blip of time on the radar of the scale of the world, that we are ruining the planet by mining and utilizing fossil fuels. That's ludicrous from the standpoint that this planet's been here for better than 4 billion years. It's been through many changes. It evolves in its own methodology. The small influence industrialization started in this country and around the world in the late 1800s. So you're telling us that in 150 years that we have usurped 4 billion years of this planet functioning without interruption with our development of products for energy. It's absurd. It's political. It gives them the opportunity to completely transform the size of and impact of government. The more things like this that they're involved in, the more bureaucracy, the more money, and the bigger and stronger and more controlling the government becomes. So energy is the key. The reason that you go to the grocery store and pay like 40% more for ground beef or sugar or you name the product, milk, bread, everything, prices in grocery stores 30% higher than they were when this administration, Kamala Harris's administration, she's going to do so much for you on the first day. Guess what she's done in 3,050 odd days? She's done not a damn thing. She has been lazy. She has been uninvolved. She has been put in charge of some things which she totally ignored. Like the border, for instance, where only 14 or 15 million people walked in the country. And I love this. Kamala's record on the border is terrible. She's done a terrible job on the border. No, actually, Kamala's done a great job on the border because her marching orders from the powers that be behind the scenes who got this delusional or dementia-ridden president and a completely inexperienced, unqualified vice president, her marching orders were, okay, you're in charge of the border. You be in charge and don't do anything and let this organized effort just unfold. This is not ineptitude. This is intent. Kamala Harris followed orders and has done nothing at the border and intends to do nothing. All of a sudden, her campaign rhetoric is she's strong on the border. Give me a break. So that being said, she's also vowing to help you and get prices down, take away price gouging, which she called on a teleprompter price gauging, which just shows how scholarly she is because the whole subject of her speech was price gouging. That's a policy that a socialist country would impose to tell private corporations in a free enterprise, free market society, I'm going to have to limit you on what you can charge for that package of Oreos. You can charge up to $2.99 and that's it. That is government control. That is not free enterprise. That is not free market. That is not capitalism. Again, if you're voting for things like that, you're voting to go down a path that you can never find your way back, because once you open that Pandora's box and let government run all the industry, set pricing, do all the things they're talking about, it is hard. It's easy to vote for that, saying, hey, that sounds good. She's going to limit prices by telling them how much they can charge. That's not the way this works. And it ties back to what I talked about a minute ago, energy. Because when energy is limited and prices for energy explode in a high area, like has happened here. If you look at your gas pump, it's not $1.80 like it was at the end of the Trump administration. In a lot of places, it's over $5, and it averages almost $4 a gallon now. The reason for that is because we're not producing gas and oil, and we're buying it from some of the most insidious places in the world. So we're still depending on fossil fuel, but we're not producing our own, which is absolutely ridiculous. And that's why everything costs so much. Energy and economy are hand in hand. You've got to be energy independent and energy abundant. And you also need, if you've got a supply, to make the rest of the world sufficient with their energy needs, and you profit unbelievably by being the provider of such. By him cutting everything off and stopping our pipelines, but yet approving the Russian Nord Stream pipeline in Europe, Russia's become the primary provider of energy for all of Europe, which is absurd because then we're paying $100 billion with the money that Putin has gotten from being back in the energy business because Biden allowed that and cut our energy production off. So the complete nonsensical part of that is we're sending $100 billion to Ukraine so far because Putin now has the money to prosecute this war. I mean, it's just like we're sticking our hands in the wood chipper one after the other. It's just unbelievable, and there's no justification for it. So energy and economy are tied together. If energy comes down, if we start producing again on day one, like Donald Trump says, and he didn't say, I'm going to be a dictator from day one. That's another quote that they distort. He said on day one, I'm going to be a dictator. On the first day, I'm going to be a dictator in two senses. I'm going to open up the spigots and drill, baby, drill. And I'm also going to secure our border to keep 14 million more people from coming into this country and exhausting our resources and further bankrupting our country. That's what he said. I'll be a dictator on the first day, not on day one. That's a whole different connotation. And he was being facetious by using the word dictator because he says those are two executive orders he was going to issue right away. So when you hear them say, he said he's going to be a dictator from day one, that is not what he said. He said on the first day, I'll be a dictator. And again, that was somewhat tongue in cheek because he intends to get us back to be energy independent like we were in 2020 when his term ended. And now we are not at all anymore because of this left wing of the party, these socialist, Marxist, lunatic nutbags that have demanded that we stop producing fossil fuels despite having the biggest abundance of that in the whole world. So those two reasons, very compelling. Energy economy. You bring the price of energy down, the price of goods comes down because the price to ship those to markets and to even manufacture them. Where do you think all of these products come from? They've got to come from plants that are powered. If the energy costs for these people are just exorbitant, then of course the prices are going to be reflected on a higher scale. And that's the simple breakdown economically of energy and economy. And if you're not in favor of that, if you want to continue to pay skyrocketing prices because as energy costs go higher, prices for consumers are going to go higher. That is the edge. That is the elementary. There's another E word. It's elementary that your vote go the way. Even if you can't stand Donald Trump, that's the policy he wants to impose. That is not the direction we would go in a Kamala Harris administration. And the last thing, Elon Musk is celebrated as probably the greatest entrepreneur of our lifetimes. He's a guy that has parlayed his brilliant, innovative, scientific mind, practical mind, and created some incredibly amazing businesses and enterprises. There's another E word, enterprising. Elon Musk has looked at this situation. A lot of people, especially Americans who have admired all of the different things he has done, have said this is the smartest man in the world. And anybody who disputes that despite his list of accomplishments, is really kind of fooling themselves right now, even if you don't like his current political stance, which is why I'm saying this. Elon Musk, the smartest man in the world, the most innovative man in the world, a guy that has made an absolute fortune, and this is somebody who's so committed to what he believes in. He bought Twitter. He bought Twitter for 45 billion. That's a B, $45 billion. And he was asked recently, was that a good business investment? He laughed and he said, good business investment? Hell no, it's a terrible business investment. I'll never get my money back from Twitter. But what I do get is ensuring that there's a platform that is not censored, that is open for free speech, and that is the most important component that makes the whole concept of America work. So from that standpoint, 45 billion is like 100 times worth it and more, because we keep the pipeline open where the free expression of ideas can be conveyed. And I can tell you, I suffered from the previous Twitter administrations, because if you post anything they remotely didn't like, they would either put a tag on it and say, this is a possible disinformation, or they would suspend you for a week or 10 days, saying that you violated their basically anything they disagreed with, you can't express. And if you want to live in that country, I sure don't. Censorship, not my bag. I don't think any American person really wants to live muzzled and unable to express their ideas. So Elon Musk, the smartest man in the world, has agreed with me. He is actually, and this is one of the great honors of my recent life, 2 times in the last month, Elon Musk has reposted things that I've put on his platform X. And they're always about this election not being Republican versus Democrat, not being Trump against Harris. This is something much more enormous than that. This is an election where you either are siding with keeping America in line with our founding principles, honoring our Constitution, which is the lifeblood of our nation, or scrapping all of that and going in a direction where you are going to hand the keys to the car to this movement who has been working methodically for years, as Barack Obama called it in his first election in 2008, the transformation of America. And the definition of transformation of America: to make us a global citizen, to take away our strength and independence and individual liberty. And if that's the country you want to live in, where you are subject to prosecution, arrest, and imprisonment, if that's what your aspiration is for yourself, your kids, your grandkids, and their kids, then by all means, vote on that other direction. But if you're like Elon Musk, the smartest guy in America, and Kip Kiefer, I won't say I'm in that category, but I promise you I pour over and know enough about history and politics and the history of America and the principles it was founded on. If you disagree with us and think that's the better way to go, I'm not going to stop you, but that's my most persuasive argument, just for you to consider these facts before you punch your ballot tomorrow, assuming you have not done so as of yet. God bless America. God bless all of you. I thank you, whether you agree with me or not. That's, again, not the point of this show. I just want to give you a lot of thoughts to grind around and come up with your own conclusions. And that's what I've got today. Energy, economy, Elon. Thanks, everybody. And we will talk to you next week here on Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.